podcast that connects the dots for business leaders to drive revenue through effective marketing strategy. We chat with marketing experts on different topics that will help you ramp up your revenue. We stream live on LinkedIn, Twitter, and YouTube, and you can listen to us on your favorite podcast platforms. Marketing Demystified, the podcast, is presented to you by GrowGetter, your partner in growth marketing. And here's today's episode.
Hello, everyone. Are you ready to be inspired, informed, and empowered with actionable tips to transform your marketing game? You're in the right place. Welcome to Marketing Demystified. I'm your host, Jenn Mancusi, CEO and co-founder of GrowGetter, your growth marketing partner. Now, account-based marketing is certainly a way to get in front of the right target buyers with a highly personalized approach. And on today's ABM-related episode, we'll dive into the topic of lifecycle ABM. Marcelo Fernandes, Global Head of Adoption and Account-Based Marketing at SAP, joins me to give us details on how to make use of ABM across the customer lifecycle. Welcome to the show, Marcelo.
Hello, Jenn. Thanks for having me. A great pleasure to be here.
Really happy to have you on. You know, I'm a big fan of an account-based strategy and account-based marketing. And so I'm excited to hear your take on ABM as it relates to customer lifecycle.
Yeah, sure. I think in the past, ABM was much seen as something, just to demand generation or even to acceleration of opportunities. Actually, more acceleration of opportunities, I guess. I think only, recently with the technology platforms that we see, people are more concerned about, targeting specific accounts using technology and then talking about how you create demand generation. But because SAP, of course, is in the cloud business. 2.5 years ago, when we started to build this global framework for ABM, we thought that this just the demand generation side wouldn't be enough. So we would have to think about how the customers we would incentive or help customers to actually use and consume our solutions. So then we had the idea to consider the whole customer life cycle, and not only let's say the sales side of the game, but also the post-sale side of the game. To touch these customers in a more really life cycle approach way.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I mean, I feel like that's often a forgotten part of the journey for maybe not for marketers necessarily, but for the expectation that's put on marketers is that, demand gen is the focus. And sometimes if you're lucky, you get to do a little bit of brand, but customer marketing is always last in line. And from an ABM perspective, it seems sort of the same thing, that ABM is often an account-based strategy is the goal is to drive more revenue as opposed to making more usage or a more engaged and happy customer. Is that sort of the same thing that you're seeing?
Yeah, actually, if you think about this, the revenue piece, I think in theory in the past, in many kinds of businesses, I don't think that this is just a kind of cloud company approach. That could be like any company that has post-sale, need to keep like selling services, selling maintenance afterwards, whatever is the model, or it's based on a fee, on a monthly fee or something like that. Whatever is the model, I think the concern should be, okay, I sold something, so I was trying to convince something, so I was using ABM, trying to give the best impressions and give the best connections, create the best connections with the executives from your company, with the executives of your customer, trying to build a future together and so on. Okay, I won the deal. So now what? So now it's time to really, think about how you're going to leverage what has been, decided and what has been bought by, the customer, and really, make them understand the value of that, realize the value of that, and continuously use, the solution that or the services that you're selling. Right. So it's a kind of, I think, a kind of mindset, not thinking only about, oh, I just did this revenue here today and I had this boom spark in my numbers, but how do I make sure that I'll continue engaging with this customer so that when the time comes, and most of the new business models, they have like a time a contract that's associated with time. When the time
Mm.
comes, then I make sure that I renew this opportunity with the customer, and during this time, eventually I do cross sell, upsell, and I create new opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, how do you think about uh, sort of choosing targets for an account-based approach? Are you, when you're thinking about customers, is there a segmentation involved, or is there a hierarchy of, like, how do you think about taking an account-based approach when you have a really large customer base?
Yeah, in our particular case, we have a specific segment, and now we have also a new segmentation model that we are using. And within this specific segment, we host, most of the largest companies across the globe that represent a big part of the, SAP business. So within this group, I'm talking about roughly 150 something accounts. Within this group, we kind of decided that based on this other segmentation model that we have that we can work with these accounts as long as the sales team sees, of course, necessity to do something with this account, and there is, an objective, a common objective that we can build together to, that's needed for that particular business. And then we select these accounts based on their size, based on their potential deals, based on the deals that are, really on the table, and based on this segmentation that in our case takes also into consideration the need for, adoption and consumption of our solutions. So that's kind of how we segmented the accounts that are part of the program, and then we are developing activities for these accounts along this year, and they are based in multiple regions across the globe.
Hmm. I think it's so important that you mentioned the collaboration with other teams. You mentioned sales, but it could be other teams as well, customer team or an account team or something in another business. But I think that when we talk about account-based marketing, it often feels like a marketing initiative, which by its name sounds like it, but actually it has to be joined up with what other teams are doing. Because, like you said, if sales doesn't see the need for those efforts, then maybe the marketing efforts won't have as much of an impact as if they're joined up with a sales effort or a customer effort or something like that.
Yeah, correct. I think the prime condition for an ABM program to succeed is exactly that, you are aligned with sales, and sales sees the value and they want to participate on that, right? After, in the end, they own the relationship with the customer. They understand what are the key objectives. So in our particular case here, I developed like a, planning template for our marketeers, for the people working with ABM, so that they can really engage with the sales team and, collect some information that's related to the strategy of that customer, to the challenges of that customer. So you kind of do a brain exercise with the marketeer for them to really deep dive and understand the challenges and the objectives of this account, so that, understanding from sales and partnering with sales, you can for sure make a better a better plan, and think about better touches across the specific journey for this account, right? So yeah, that's a very important condition to, for an ABM program to be successful.
Yeah, absolutely. And you mentioned 150 accounts. Do you think that is like, is there some method to that specific range of numbers? Often people say, like, how many accounts should I be targeting in an ABM effort or an account-based strategy? And I'm curious about the 100 to 150 accounts.
Yeah, these accounts, in our case, they are part of a program that's called the Strategic Customer Program, and
Mm,
they represent really from a revenue perspective, and also not only revenue, but with the whole SAP and customer relationship, an important portion of, the business, right? So they are relevant accounts, and we, of course, that it would be great to extend this program to 1,000 accounts, right? SAP has 400,000 accounts, customers across the globe. But it would be great to extend this kind of approach, very dedicated, very, specific to 500 or 1,000 accounts. But the thing is, how you manage your resources, and how you balance all the other programs that you have running, in marketing in general across the company with this specific effort for ABM. So I believe that each company will have their own Pareto. They will have their representation of, okay, these are my bigger customers. They represent a significant amount of money or significant amount of potential revenue in my company. So I want to prioritize and include them in a specific program, and all the others will be part of other programs, right, which are less personalized. So I think that's a kind of the reasoning that we developed, and I think that's the way to go with when you talk about account-based marketing, because that ABM is probably, I'm saying that ABM now is probably the most misused term in the industry, right? People are starting to say ABX, and people are saying, oh, we are doing account-based everything. But if you think about the concept of ABM, you know, or the I know that sometimes it may sound like puristic, but the concept of ABM, as the name says, is account based, right? So you really need to be able to understand the realities of that specific account, and not just delivering a message that may sound personalized to that account, but in the end of the day, it's part of a segment of a campaign that you're developing, right? So the ABM case is different because, and it's much more difficult, exactly because if you are building an agenda, for example, for an engagement with a customer, the team needs to have a strong interaction with sales and with sometimes even with the customer sponsor, to say, okay, these are the hot topics to me, to my company. I'm not talking about this 10 top trends of the market. I'm using this maybe two of the top 10, because they are the ones that are relevant to my situation, to my stage on the customer journey, to my maturity as a company, all these kinds of things. So I think that doing this segmentation and thinking about that is really important.
Yeah, I think that's such a it's such a good example of it done well, where you say, we've got 400,000 customers and 150 are part of this strategic program. Like that is a level of editing that I think a lot of companies struggle to get to, because yes, all of your customers are important, and it would be great if you could personalize a program specifically to all 400,000 customers, but it's not realistic to do so. So, really being able to prioritize is what can make those programs more effective. Because I have seen programs where, you try to, I hear people say, we want to scale our ABM approach, which just is sort of an oxymoron, right? You cannot scale ABM. You have to really stay targeted in order for it to be effective.
Yeah, we are. I think we are going through this as well. People want to scale ABM right now. There's an intention to try to scale that, but everything is relative, right? So scaling something may be different things to different people, and I think when you think about scaling, even though you have like martech companies today that can help you kind of target, give some sort of personalized or some level of personalization to more accounts, right? So you may want to divide in levels of personalization that you can actually achieve, right? If you have a very specific, dedicated segment that you selected based on your business criteria, then you can develop more really tailored programs to these specific accounts. But that doesn't mean that eventually using martech technology, you can marketing technology, you can't really do something that's that has a lower level of personalization, but somehow you're filtering some criteria and you're delivering some kind of message. This is, to me, basic segmentation and targeting kinds of campaigns, right? But before, I think the technology was not enabling anyone to really do and kind of personalize the message, and even know if a specific company is accessing your page that is from an industry or that is from a particular area, that you can actually deliver content to this specific company in a more personalized way. But it's never going to be the one-to-one kind of approach, as understanding really deeply what that specific customer needs, right? But so you need these different levels of, I think, personalization, and I think technology is getting there to enable more and more this possibility. And then that's when you're talking about scale. But then that's where, to me, the ABM, the account based concept gets a little bit lost in this whole process.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, if it's an industry-based targeting and segmentation, it's not account-based. It's industry-based, right? And so
Exactly.
there's or whatever other segments you put in place. So yeah, there's definitely
People
ways.
yeah, people are starting to say ABX, right? And they're starting to say, oh, account based, everything. I'm calling more like, instead of saying ABX, let's say XBM, right? Because then you can, it's not account, but it's based marketing. So
Yes.
it's maybe a different way to see that.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Yeah, that's it's another strategy, not the same thing. It's something else,
Yeah.
and we should treat it slightly differently. So, getting back to specifically customer lifecycle ABM, what are some of the key stages or touch points we should be thinking about when putting together a strategy?
Yeah, when you think about the touch points, of course, you have the traditional ABM touch points, right? So it depends very much on the objective of the account. And in our particular case, one specific customer can have multiple solutions, right, that they bought. And these multiple solutions may be in different stages of maturity, usage, even the adoption. These customers, they might be negotiating a deal for solution A, and in solution B they already implemented, so they need support to get this this solution moving faster, understanding change management, understanding how other companies are leveraging that solution and making the best use of it, so that the customer can actually enjoy and really realize the best benefits of their of the solution, of the technology that they bought, right? So I think what is really different in this life cycle approach is that instead of you just thinking about, oh, I'm trying to do this, the traditional revenue and relationship and reputation kind of, approach, you also think about how you're going to support that. So in my program here, I kind of changed this 3 R's definition. Instead of reputation, I replace it by renewal. So one of the things that we are thinking about, okay, you're building the reputation, the revenue, the relationship with the customer, but how you're thinking about the renewal of this in the future, right? How you make sure that they use what you sowed, so that by the end of a certain time frame, then you have a happy customer, and they want to repeat that cycle with you, and potentially even buy more because they are satisfied and they understand the value. So of your service, product, solution, whatever you're selling to this customer. So this is, I think, very important. And the different touch points, I think, are related to the post-sale side, right? You need to have campaigns to educate this customer. You need to have engagements with customer to really bring them the best of breed of what's being used and what's being done by other experts, so that they can leverage and use as well. And of course, everything associated with their particular situation, because they are a unique customer, and they have their own ways of doing things. They have their own way of implementing whatever solutions you are running, so you're selling. So I think that's a basic difference in structure from a traditional ABM approach.
Yeah, for sure. And so, what does the kind of planning process look like to be ready to implement a program like that? Because even thinking about like, what content do you have to have at the ready? What kind of research or analytics do you need to do to determine like the right match of, this is the personalized content that this client needs at this right moment? Like, what does that planning process look like?
Yeah, well, the planning process is, I think, is pretty complex. At
Mm.
this point in time, we are developing what we call marketing core elements for ABM. By the way, because of this, ABM, the term being not, or being misused in many situations, we rebranded our program to strategic account marketing, which is in essence the same thing, but we have this more life cycle approach. So when we are planning, in the planning phase, as I mentioned, we have the template for planning, so that people can really think about the key things, key elements that they need to include based on the objectives that come out of this, this template. And then we make the analysis also of what is the pipeline that's there. What are the areas of this pipeline? What are the key areas that we need to touch, in specifically to this pipeline? And is there a renewal objective in this account at this point in time, or if it's just a a demand generation or more acceleration approach? Because I don't think that in many of the cases it's very hard to really do a plan that includes from end to end at a very short period of time, right? So a year is not enough for you to touch everything. So in the end of the day, when the APMers are talking to sales, they kind of define, okay, are we focusing more on the adoption side because this customer needs, or are we focusing more on that supporting that specific deals that are going on, right? So it's very unlikely that you have an account that would be the ideal state. So when I was training, enabling, the teams on this, I even created like a situation where you would have exactly this both areas to be addressed, so that people could understand exactly how you deal with these two different areas. But in real life, it's very hard to do that because the time is not enough, and the objectives of the sales teams vary a lot from customer to customer, right? um, that doesn't mean that we don't have other initiatives that are touching, for example, the adoption side, because we have one to few initiatives as well. And these customers, they might be also included in this other initiatives that eventually are
Mm.
not specifically designed and on a one-on-one basis, but they're not forgotten. They will be included, which is something that also we think about and we advocate, right? The company executes and does many different engagements along the year, right? We have literally hundreds of things going on. So when you're planning your account-based marketing, you need to be thinking about what are the things that I'm developing from a one-on-one perspective, really, which typically are not too many because you don't have the time to really do multiple one-on-one touches across the year. But what other things that are happening across the company I can leverage, and I can make sure that I have a white glove experience to this customer. Like we have SAP Sapphire, for example. So we had customers coming part of the ABM program that attended Sapphire. Some had a very specific program designed for them. Some, they just had a white glove kind of experience where marketing and the salespeople, they built like a journey for this customer within the event, and they made sure that they participate in the right sessions. So that was not crafted specifically for that customer, but the sensation the customer has is that there was an attention to their particular needs, and then a journey created for them within a bigger event that's happening. So that's how we see things at this point in time.
That's such an interesting way to approach it. I love that, sort of how can you, because that does overcomplicate any ABM strategy that's in place, is that there are broader campaigns that any company is doing and broader initiatives that are happening at any given time. So how do you prioritize? And it adds a layer of complexity. But I think what you're describing of like, how do you take something that is for everyone and personalize it for that group? As I'm listening to you, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners here today are, smaller companies with smaller teams that are like, how I would never have the resource to be able to implement a program that's as well crafted as one at SAP, right? But that's such a great way to be able to say, hey, we're having an event, and you're going to curate a journey specifically for this handful of customers that might be there, and that's a way that you can kind of maximize your efforts, right?
Right.
And scale a little bit of some of the work that you're doing.
Yeah, a couple of days ago was SAP Now, which is another event that happens across SAP, was happening in São Paulo, Brazil, and I was just attending there. And there was a session that was done with key customers, part of the ABM, the Strategic Account Marketing Program that we have also running here. And they were in a meeting all together, speaking with the president of Latin America, with the president of the Brazilian office. So we leveraged the big event and their presence, and they had an exclusive lunch and kind of lunch and learn, or lunch workshop with this executive. So we are connecting our high level executives that can give good messages and the most updated answers to these customers, to very important, very large customers, without developing anything specifically to
Mhm.
each one of them. But this situation served for all of them. Of course, that you're gonna have, if you have like 400 people sitting in a room, then it's not ABM, right? But in this one, they are selected. They had other engagements that already happened, during the year, and we are leveraging the existence of this big event and including them in this particular session. So, as you said, you don't need to, in this situation, you just need to orchestrate, not necessarily create something that's very new, because the rooms are there, the structure is there, they will be there. It's just connecting people and creating the right content for them.
Yeah, amazing. I love that approach, because yeah, it's complex, and there are so many other moving parts and pieces that aren't part of the ABM program that you have to factor in. So it's a great way to kind of think of those things together. Um, how do you think about measuring success for these programs? What metrics or KPIs do you think are the most critical to consider? And is it, are you measuring the program as a whole or individual customer experiences? How do you think about those metrics?
Yeah, before I answer your question, just making a, because you mentioned that a lot of people may be watching and they are from smaller companies and so on. It's not because SAP is a global and it's a bigger company with like 100,000 employees. We also have situations in market units that are very small, so they look
Mm,
like smaller companies when you think about that, right? And they don't have the right resources. Sometimes people are sharing their ABM work with something else, and in most of our situations, actually across SAP, we have this kind of profile. So I think the smart planning is the answer for that. So independently, if you are a big company or a smaller company, just sit and think about how you can leverage things that are already happening and create these tailored experiences.
yeah.
But going through the KPI topic, KPIs and measuring ABM is really a hot topic. Every single ABM discussion that I'm part of, the leadership teams of ABM in the associations and so on, everybody struggles with measuring ABM. And that's because most of the ways to measure things are very associated with lead generation, with the funnel movement and things like that. Whereas, particularly I think in our case, ABM is not associated with this piece, because during the planning process, the sales teams already kind of create their opportunities in the system, which means that the marketing contribution from an opportunity creation, it's going to be very small, right? Because these things are already created during the planning season that we have for those accounts. So for us, what really matters is how we get this opportunity. So we have and going to the KPI already, we have like a day zero, that we measure things, and then we have a methodology to say, okay, across this time frame here, this accounts were touched by ABC things. So how is this pipeline progressing? How is it growing? Is it going now? Is it closing? So we kind of associate this movement of the pipeline with these accounts that we have. So we have like this methodology, to kind of monitor and track, considering a day zero of on the day that this plannings were done, to actually what we are seeing in motion right now. So from time to time, we go back to there, we do the analysis of the accounts, and we say, okay, so account, this group of accounts here, they had this X pipeline, they had, now it's X plus 20%. So there was a growth in pipeline. We cannot attribute specifically to the activities that we are doing, because of course, as I said, multiple things are touching these accounts, but we know that of course there is an effect going on, by the fact that these accounts were selected, and by the fact that we are doing things for this particular account, right? And I came up with that because last year was the first actual year that we implemented ABM, across the regions. And by the end of the year, I was able to prepare a report where we said, okay, we had this group of accounts here. We had about 90, 100, almost 100 accounts in the program. So for the ones that we actually developed active programs, there was this progress. For those ones that we didn't have anything, there was no progress or very slow progress. So it showed us that we selected the right accounts, of course, because there was a partnership with sales. So sales is also changing and moving things on that particular account. But it also showed us that in the accounts that nothing happened, nothing really happened. So we didn't do anything, nobody did anything. So there was actually, or no change in the pipeline or in the business, or the change was very small compared to the other. So we could see that there was a positive correlation between the things that we were doing versus the things that we were not, the accounts that we are not touching at all. So that was the way that we measured. This year I tried to implement a kind of one-to-one kind of a measurement and metrics, but this is really, from a system perspective, so hard, so complicated, that we're kind of still stuck to this movement from period to period, and then we see the difference, and then that's kind of how we attribute this.
Yeah. Well, I think what you said earlier about how important it is to have this common objective with the other people that are touching those same accounts, whether that's sales or whoever, that is a blessing and a curse, because you can't attribute anything to specific activities. But I think actually that's the way marketing, that's the direction marketing should be going. If we, when we were in the sort of days of everything can be measured and everything has to be attributed, did this dollar come from marketing? Did this dollar come from sales? It sort of created these more siloed teams and this sort of constant, headbutting of like who's responsible for the revenue growth. And I think that created a lot of the sales and marketing challenges that we have today. So adopting these common objectives and working together towards a shared goal. Yeah, you may not be able to say, that specific session in that event that was for those strategic accounts drove more X, but
Right.
that general focus on those accounts is directionally, having improving other key metrics that you care about. I think that's the way. I hope that everybody outside of marketing and sales adopts that and is comfortable with that being the measurement style, because I know other execs are, they still want to see the dollar for dollar comparison, but I think it's a good thing. I think it shows collaboration and really, does have a bigger impact than the sort of what did this ad drive or whatever tactic we might be
Yeah,
talking
it's.
about.
I think it's an evolving conversation. I've been in the industry for 25 years, and in the past, when we used to do like trade shows and build those big stands and um, do these events, nobody was really asking how much pipeline was coming out of that. The question was, our customers attending this event, do I have more relationship with them? Did they see my presentations and they are really getting my message? And nobody was really concerned about how we extract pipeline out of that, right? I think that conversation started when technology came up. So we started to have this funnel metrics discussions, how the opportunities are progressing, sales stages, and things like that. But in general, I agree. I mean, there should be a joint effort in the end, specifically with ABM. I think the end goal is really to convert the opportunity that's there, right? It's really revenue. It's not really creating the opportunities. Opportunity creation can happen, right? Because if you are discussing something, you're trying to accelerate an existing deal, there might be a conversation about, oh, what about that we didn't think about, this, so we create a new opportunity there, right? But if you're working together, then it's a better chance of I think success, rather than having that funnel, and then I deliver the leads to the sales, and the sales, it's always complaining that there's no quality, and this kinds of things. So I think working together is always the best way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, that might be a good segue. Like, how do you think about balancing goals around acquisition versus adoption versus revenue expansion when you're thinking about lifecycle ABM? Is that something that you do in collaboration with those other teams that you're working with?
Yeah, we have two different areas, right? We have kind of the pre. They're kind of getting integrated, but from a concept perspective, we have kind of different stakeholders for the pre-sales and the post-sales side, right? So we have to work with these different stakeholders, to make sure that they understand the plan, even though the plan from a core plan perspective, it's still very much driven by the sales side and not by the post-sale side, because most of these plans in ABM, they start with this need to accelerate and close the deal, right? But we introduced the second part, which is the consumption, adoption, and consumption part, exactly to trying to give this life cycle approach. But the stakeholders that work with the adoption and consumption, they're not the same as the sales side, right? So we are still working on this on these programs, on understanding each other and what is participation of, because we have so many areas. The company is so big. So we are working. By the way, I'm traveling next week exactly to participate in a workshop to discuss that, not specifically to ABM, but how we are working together in different areas that we make sure that we are touching these accounts. But from an account based perspective, the ABMers, they're trying to really address the best the objectives that are selected for those accounts, and developing specific programs for those accounts. And that can be the campaigns or one-to-one meetings, EBCs, one-to-one innovation days. We have different activities in our portfolio, as well as for the post-sale, you have the specific customer success days, and other initiatives that we do for these accounts as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And, I'm curious too, how do you think about, we've talked a lot about collaboration with sales or other departments, but what about other functions within the marketing teams? Does implementing an account-based strategy, lifecycle ABM, impact your content strategy or demand gen or product marketing or brand even? How do you work with the other functions within marketing to kind of steer this strategy?
Yeah, we work well. First of all, in our case here, ABM is part of field marketing organization. So I report
Mm,
into the global field marketing head, and this is very much driven by field marketing. But yes, we developed. We are in the process of developing actually different standard. We call it core plan elements, and these core plan elements are guidelines and playbooks for people to know if you're running a one-to-one specific event in this format, what do you need, what is the format of this, what is the branding of this, what is the content that you need, how the agenda would look like. So then in this situation, we work with product marketing and also like with branding and other areas to make sure that we are building this playbook, and the playbook includes this element so that we can standardize the approach across different regions, and also have the best of breed in terms of the content that we are talking about, right? Because content, and I'm talking about mostly events, because I think to me and until now, the account-based marketing effort here has been very much based on in-person engagements. Because
mm,
in the end of the day, you're engaging with these high-level executives from customer and with our people. So digital doesn't really make sense from this perspective. Now we are developing and working on another campaign right now, focused on a specific product area, where we are exactly working on a digital campaign that's going to deliver assets and content. And then again, we are working with product marketing to make sure that this content is updated, it's a best message possible, so that we are personalizing this content to each account as much as we can, and then the idea is that we deliver this content digitally to these accounts as well. So it's another way to approach that, and this would be complemented then with some in-person engagements. Um,
yeah.
this within my framework, my ABM framework, the idea, and we had cases in the past also where we did large digital campaigns focused on one specific account, and we had 60,000 employees of this account touched by a digital campaign, a LinkedIn digital campaign actually. And so as part of the ABM journey, I have the in-person and I have the digital touches as well. It's just that the digital sometimes is a little bit more complicated and takes more time to be executed. And people ask more questions rather than the in-person, where it's kind of more straightforward. So it's a development and maturity issue.
Yeah, I think it's such an important thing to touch on in terms of the evolution of account-based marketing in general. As you mentioned in the beginning, when ABM was first a concept, it was all about, demand generation via technology, targeted ad serving, things like that. Like ABM was equal to targeting specific accounts online. And actually, it's more of a concept than it is a tactic. And to blend things like in person and digital is so important because it's about like a focus, an ongoing focus on specific accounts from all different directions. So I think it's such an important, I love that that evolution is going in that direction. It's more of an omni-channel approach than it is. It's, ABM is not a technology, it's a strategy.
Right, exactly. And I encourage, every ABMer to actually, if you haven't done that, talk to a salesperson, go visit customers, go understand, because, like 15, 20 years ago, where before this whole ABM, before digital, before everything, and I'm not revealing my age there, but but I used to go. I was working in the telco business, and in the telco business, you have less customers, right? Because it's more concentrated. So I used to go with the sales team and visit the customers and develop relationships with the marketing departments of these operators, because we were selling a service that needed some sort of support, to teach them how to use and make money with the service. So I was doing that, and even though the solution was the same, the product was the same, the usage and perceptions of each customers were so different from each other. The stages, how fast I implement this, how much I believe on this technology or not, or how much I'm going to invest on this. So that's why I think the beauty of account based is exactly this, because you can then tailor a program to that specific situation. But to do that, I'm not saying that you need to visit every single customer in your ABM program, but by visiting a few, you kind of get this sense that maybe when they talk about something, you understand where they're coming from, not just as in theory, but because you heard different scenarios from different customers, and that makes a lot of difference.
Yeah, I love that. It's the best way to have a customer centric approach is to actually talk to and meet with and get to know customers, and that has shifted over the years in terms of marketing being a part of that conversation. Maybe it was more for a while and then kind of went away. Now it does feel like there's a lot more focus, especially from the product marketing side of things, to really build relationship and be on this sort of journey of continuous discovery with clients to make sure that the marketing programs are designed for them, designed for your customers, not designed for some business objective, and then they're more effective that way.
Yeah, exactly. That's the way to go, I believe.
Yeah, for sure. Well, thank you so much for joining today and talking about this topic. I love the kind of nuances of, the evolution of ABM and how it applies on the customer lifecycle side. So I really appreciate you sharing all your expertise with us today.
Yeah, sure. Thanks again for the invitation and having me here.
Absolutely. Thanks everyone for listening in today. I'll be back with another episode very soon.